Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Dave. Here to do another video. We talk a little bit about a new movie that I saw yesterday, The Apprentice, about the life of, the early life of Donald Trump. The movie stars Sebastian Stan as Donald Trump. Many people know Sebastian Stan from The Mandalorian Season 2 as the young Luke Skywalker. And Jeremy Strong as his lawyer, Roy Cohn. Now, obviously, the title, The Apprentice, is based on Donald Trump's TV show that started in 2004 and ran up right up until his first presidential campaign in 2015. A very successful show. The show that really launched him into the national media stratosphere, beyond the scope of the New York audience that he was, that was accustomed to knowing him. But this movie takes it back to 1973. Now, it opens up with news footage, riots in various places, the riots in 65 in Watts, the riots in 68, like in Detroit and across the country. And then Richard Nixon, as he's undergoing, the investigation for Watergate, the famous Richard Nixon speech. People need to know that if their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. Yeah, he says, and Trump is watching it. But as he's watching it, Trump himself is going through a very personal issue. His father is being sued, for violating the Fair Housing Act. What is the Fair Housing Act? The Fair Housing Act is an act, obviously, that prevents discrimination based on race. So, Fred Trump, a real estate developer, owns Trump Village, a apartment complex in Brooklyn, New York. And he is accused of denying access to African Americans. And of course, this being the 1970s, this is a very sensitive issue. So they show like Donald Trump going to various tenants' apartments and collecting the rent and just being ruthless to these tenants, telling them you have to get out. The one schizophrenic tenant says, you're not real, you're all in my head. And he throws scalding hot water on Donald Trump. And luckily Trump moves out of the way. So, and then they show the Trump family having dinner. And you see Fred Trump, you see Donald Trump, you see the mother, Mother Trump, and you see Fred Trump. And basically, Fred Trump was the firstborn son. So he's the namesake. Fred Trump Jr. is the namesake of his father. So he was primed to take over the Trump organization, and not Donald, but he chose to go a different route. First off, they indicate that and you see it throughout the film, that he struggles with his alcohol addiction and abuse. And the father, it's because the father berates him a lot. The father puts him down. He says, because Donald Trump has a dream. And one of his dream is to buy this hotel, the Commodore, and turn it into Trump Towers. So the father thinks that this dream is too ambitious, right? He thinks that it can never work. What's up, David? He thinks that it can, how you doing? It can never work. It's impossible. And then the father, Fred Trump, says, well, why should I listen to you, Freddie? You're just a bus driver with wings. So he's basically pitting his sons against. It reminded me of the movie Iron Claw with Fritz von Erich pitting his sons against each other. Fred Trump is kind of doing the exact same thing, pitting his sons Donald and Freddie against one another. But Donald Trump is a rising star in real estate, but he needs a lawyer. He needs legal advice. So he goes to Roy Cohn. And that's where the name makes sense again because Donald Trump in this movie is the apprentice. He's the apprentice. He's the students. Roy Cohn is the teacher. Roy Cohn is going to teach him about how to navigate the world of business and politics in New York. Roy Cohn is in this scene. He's sitting at the table. He's sitting at the table with high profile people. One of the high profile people that he's sitting at the table with, Fat Tony Salerno. Who is Fat Tony Salerno? Fat Tony Salerno was the Don, aka the head of the Genovese crime family, one of the five prominent crime families of the Cosa Nostra organization in New York City. So Roy Cohn, he's telling Roy Cohn about this situation, about the housing discrimination lawsuit. And Roy is basically telling him that, liberals in the United States are full of shit because they know for a fact that they wouldn't want their son or daughter going to school with a black person, but they what we would call today in today's lingua franca, we would call it virtue signaling. We would call it, trying to act like a goody two shoes just to show people you're a goody two shoes and trying to say the right thing because you think that's the right thing to say. So Roy Cohn thinks that liberals in the 1970s. Now, it kind of goes into his kind of references a little bit of who Roy Cohn actually is. Roy Cohn is not just a nobody that hangs out with mafioso and hangs out with very prominent people, past pictures with the president, Richard Nixon at the time. He is a very important figure in his own right in American history. He comes from a very rich family. His father, Albert Cohn, was a lawyer as well. And he also, was a part owner and part controller of the Lionel Toy Company that was a manufacturer of toy trains. But in addition to that, he also was a lawyer. When he was a very young boy, he was an only child. When he was a very young boy, his father, Albert Cohn, a prominent figure, ironically enough, in the Democratic Party, took him to meet with various politicians, including President Roosevelt at the time. So he was basically a prodigy in law. He passed the bar exam, Roy did, at the age of 27. And he was involved with a very famous case in 1953. So that's 20 years before the events of this film take place, involving two traders, if you will, two people a couple that was guilty of selling information, espionage information about nuclear energy to the Russians, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. And Roy was involved in getting the conviction for them because this couple was Jewish. And this couple, given that this is the 1950s, the state of New York they wanted to prosecute them, but they didn't want to seem like they were anti-Semitic. So they got a Jewish judge, Irving Kaufman, and they got a Jewish attorney to fight against them in Roy Cohn. So Roy Cohn, long story short, pushes for this couple to get the death penalty because of the crimes that they committed against the United States. And he does that. and he's very ruthless. He's a young kid in his 20s at this time, right? But he doesn't care. He doesn't, and he mentions in the film he didn't care that Ethel Rosenberg was a mother. He still felt like because she was a communist and because she, apparently sold, uh, you know, double crossed the United States and told the Russians, things about the United States to try to aim the Russians with nuclear codes and such, atomic energy information. She was guilty and she deserved the chair. So, uh, for the first time ever in the state of New York during peacetime, someone is executed. Two people, as a matter of fact, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, and this is a famous case. In addition to that, Roy Cohn, not Roy Combs from Family Feud, Roy Cohn becomes friends with Joseph McCarthy. He is during the McCarthy hearings, particularly McCarthy versus the United States Army, in which Joe McCarthy, which we talked about him before in the previous video, was a senator from Wisconsin who was alleging that there were communists infiltrating the the United States government. So Roy Cohn defends him, and this is the particular trial that Roy Cohn is heavily involved in is Joe McCarthy versus the United States Army, in which McCarthy is alleging that there are infiltrators in the United States Army that are communist. But come to find out, and this is kind of alleged, not in the film itself, but in the documentary. There's a documentary that I recommend that is a companion piece to this film called Where's My Roy Cohn, about the real life of Roy Cohn. And it's indicated that the reason why he wanted to put the United States Army on trial was to prevent his lover, G. David Shine, from being drafted into the Army at this time. So he does that, and again, he becomes highly prolific, and people start to, a big star especially in the Conservative Party, because it was the Republican Party was anti-communist stance. So by the time he in 1973 is defending Donald Trump, where the events pick up in this movie, he's already very prolific. Now, he tells Trump his three rules of life: always attack, never admit defeat, and never admit you're wrong, ever. Three things, three rules to live by. And Trump at this time, he's still kind of good. He was kind of like, he follows like a kind of Anakin Skywalker thing, because he's kind of good. He wants to do the ethical thing. He's telling Roy, we do rent to black people, but we don't rent to black people under a certain income bracket, particularly on welfare, right? So, but Roy is saying, no, don't admit to that. Just go with what you're going with, and we will win. At first, Roy says we won't win, but then Roy blackmails the judge. The judge is gay, right? So Roy, the judge has there's pictures of the judge with Cabana boys, with other men. So he blackmails him. He says, if you don't, find Donald and his father innocent, we will put these pictures out. And it's illegal for somebody in the Justice Department at that time to be homosexual. Now, the ironic part is that Roy Cohn himself is gay, right? And it's there's stuff about it that's hinted about it. For example, when the second time he and Donald Trump meet up, he gets Donald Trump drunk. He starts talking about how good looking Trump is. He pinches Trump's leg and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So there's stuff hinted about it, but initially you don't know until they win. Now, the odds were stacked against them, but they did win. And there's this huge party at Roy Cohn's mansion. A lot of people around, different famous celebrities. Andy Warhol is there and stuff. And, there's a scene where Trump is looking for Roy Cohn. He goes into Roy Cohn's room, and there's nothing but men having sex with each other. Like 4 or 5 different men. It's a huge orgy, and Roy Cohn himself is a man is making love to him, and Trump just walks in and is like, "Oh shit, I'm so, sorry, Roy. You know, I didn't, I didn't mean to do that. To walk in on you." And it's a really graphic scene, and that's when you really figure out, like, okay, this is why Roy Cohn is so against gays, because he himself is gay and he's a closeted case. Like, he doesn't want to admit he's gay. Like, they're asking him, "Are you gay? Are you gay?" in the media, and he's like, he's obscuring the fact. He's not admitting to it. So, long story short, Trump starts to absorb more of his teachings and more of his ways. And, he teaches Trump how to dress. He teaches Trump how to speak to the media. He teaches Trump everything basically Trump knows. He learns it from Roy. Roy becomes like more of a father to him than Fred. And we start to see him pulling away more from Fred, right? As he becomes bigger, especially when he does through the hey Ray, what's going on? Through the connection of Roy Cohn, he gets to buy the Commodore Hotel, and he gets to build Trump Towers, right? But this angers the citizens of the city of New York, because they, in the midst of building this hotel, they'll be kicked out of their homes, right? And these are working class people. These are poor people, right? But a guy like Trump doesn't care. He wants to achieve his dream, and that's it. He's ruthless in his business practices, right? So he builds it. And when he builds it, he considers this an achievement. And then his father, Trump's father, Fred Trump, is there. And Fred's like, "Man, this is just like when I built Trump Village back in the day." And you could start to see the change in Donald Trump, where he's like, "No, Dad, this is not like when you built Trump Village. I'm doing something better. I'm doing something greater. This is beyond the scope of your imagination," basically belittling his father, putting his father down. You were just a small-time slumlord. Me, I'm this big successful guy that's going to resurrect the city of New York. Because at the time, and they mentioned this in the film, Gerald Ford, who becomes the president right after Nixon, we talked about it in the Jimmy Carter video, where Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon, and because Nixon's resignation and the impeachment of his vice president, Spiro Agnew, Gerald Ford becomes the president. Gerald Ford had told the city of New York basically that they could go to hell because they asked for federal aid and he wasn't about to do it at that time, right? So New York is really in the doldrums, and they have Mayor Bean right at this time. Mayor Bean was the infamous mayor, during that period, during the period of the blackout, during the period of 1977, right? During the period of the blackout, during the period of the son of Sam Killer, David Berkowitz. A really tough time for the city of New York. So they get rid of Mayor Bean, and Mayor Koch comes in, and they show Mayor Koch in the movie. And Trump and Mayor Koch have this rivalry going on, because Mayor Koch, he's a Democrat, so he doesn't like that Trump is using his wealth and using his position in society to push, out, as he perceives it, the poor people. So that's really the big, and Trump goes on TV and uses the power of the media to criticize Mayor Koch, right? To say that basically Mayor Koch is the worst mayor in the world. He's doing a horrible job. Basically, Trump's shtick hasn't really changed since the 1980s to like now. He's basically done 1970s and 80s to like now. He's basically done the same thing. Whoever's in power, especially if they're a Democrat or if they're a Republican or whoever, if he doesn't like that person, because he did it with George W. Bush too, he will come out and criticize them and basically say how bad they're doing. Basically, his war with the political establishment started all those years back in New York. And, you know, they show him beating Ivana Trump. Initially, she wants to get into this club. She's denied access. And then Trump uses his power and leverage and his celebrity to get her into the club. But then, she kind of pulls away and she's engaged to another guy. And Trump goes all the way out to Aspen, Colorado, uh, to meet her. And they show Trump in like this bubble coat and stuff. He looked really funny. Some of his outfits in the 1980s were really out there. So he builds Trump Tower. It's a success. They show the escalator. Of course, the escalator that would be that he would come down with in years later, kind of foreshadowing. Then they show him building the Taj Mahal. They show him going out to Atlantic City, something that Roy Cohn was against. Roy Cohn thought he was becoming too big for his bridges, and this is the beginning of when he and Roy start to part ways, because now Trump is successful. Now he has Trump Tower. Now he's about to build the Taj Mahal, and he's about to revolutionize Atlantic City. Roy believes that it is a bad move to do so because Roy believes that once other states and cities get gambling license to legalize gambling, Atlantic City isn't going to matter much. But Trump doesn't believe it. He wants to get involved in boxing. He's friends with Don King. He does in the late 1980s get Mike Tyson to do a couple pay-per-view matches in Atlantic City, and they show wrestling in the movie. Obviously, an allusion to WrestleMania 4 and 5 that he had in Trump Plaza. In 1988 and 89, respectively. We talked about it before in this channel, the review of 1989, 1988 and 89, the year in review. So Trump is doing really well, but they kind of again, with the Iron Claw, they jump around with timelines because when they're showing him doing all this stuff, this was the late 80s. And Roy Cohn was still alive. Roy Cohn died in 1986. So basically, Roy Cohn's lover is sick. Right? Not G. David Shine, a different guy, Russell, is sick. He has pneumonia. So Roy, at the opening party for the Taj Mahal, Roy asked Donald Trump if Russell could stay at the Hyatt, the hotel. He said, sure, he'll arrange for it. After a while, when Roger Stone, we're introduced to Roger Stone for the first time ever at Roy Cohn's house. This is when Donald's going to get married to Ivanka because Ivana, not Ivanka the daughter, Ivana the mother. They're falling in love, and Trump wants basically what his mother and father had, a marriage for 40 years. He's still kind of a good guy. He's not the womanizer that he would later become and be notorious for. He's still kind of a good dude. And Roy Cohn is getting, he's on the tanning bed, and we were first introduced to Roger Stone, who would play an important part in Donald Trump's political career, later on down the line, which they don't show. And that's when Roy reveals that he himself was engaged to Barbara Walters at one time. He was dating Barbara Walters at one point, obviously trying to hide his homosexuality. He was dating Barbara Walters, where Cohn was. He encourages Donald Trump to get a prenuptial agreement with the marriage, and it almost causes Ivana to walk out. She does walk out. There's too much restrictions in the marriage contract. But Trump meets her. Famous scene. She's going to She's going to her cab. He stops her. He says, you want to be with me? I'm rich. I'm successful. I'm good looking. I'm this. I'm that. It will be a better life than you ever dreamed of. And she accepts it, right? She says, sure. And then a cab driver rolls by and goes, fuck you. Goes, congratulations. And Trump goes, fuck you. Typical New York stuff. So they get married. And at first, it's really good. You know what I mean? She has Don Jr. But as the relationship, I notice, with Donald Trump and Roy Cohn starts to deteriorate. And the media starts to get on Donald Trump even more with the power and leverage of Mayor Koch. He starts to become more frustrated. And especially when his brother Fred dies. There's a heartbreaking scene both at the wedding with the brother Fred, where he's completely drunk and belligerent. He says some Czech phrase, from in the Czech language, which was where Ivana was from, right? That he was going to give at his speech, but he's too hammered to give the speech. So Donald Trump, being a sympathetic brother, he tries to, he say, you had enough and everything, which he did early in the film, but he does it again at the wedding. But Fred is too hammered. And then there's another scene after Don Jr. is born where Fred shows up again and he's completely drunk. He has a toy car for Don Jr. And Donald Trump says, I'll give it to him later, but he's too hammered. And Donald Trump tries to save him, but is unable to save him. So you got Fred Trump, the father, his life is deteriorating with dementia. And then you have Fred Trump, the son, he's passed away. And you have Donald Trump pulling further away from Roy Cohn. And you have him also pulling further away from Ivana. And Ivana tries to cover, tries to comfort Donald Trump. She's pregnant, I guess, with Ivanka at that time. And she puts her hand on Donald, and he just pulls it away. Obviously, he's becoming less and less attracted to her, and he tells her. There's a very intense scene that a lot of people are talking about where he actually, I'll slip the scene up for you guys. She's trying to comfort him, and he's like, I don't know, I'm just not attracted to you anymore. And, since you've had the baby, I'm just not attracted to you anymore. Your big fake tits. And she's like, well, you wanted me to get these fake tits, right? You paid for these fake breasts for me to get them. He says, when I feel them, they feel like plastic, he says. And, they're arguing, and she's telling him, she's feeding into his insecurities. She's telling him, you're fat, you're balding, you're ugly. You're not all that anymore like you were when I married you. So he shoves her down, and he sexually assaults her, in the movie. He's denied that he's done this in real life, and I don't know what she said. She's passed away now. You know what I mean? So I don't know what she said, about this incident, but it was a really graphic part of the movie. And that's it. We see him, having sex with other women, getting a blowjob from another woman. Trump is basically transforming into another person, a different person, more sinister. And he's even being sinister to Roy Cohn. He's giving Roy Cohn the cold shoulder. And eventually, he kicks Roy Cohn's lover out of Trump Towers. And he says the people were complaining about it. Now, what really happened was Roger Stone was visiting. Roger Stone was visiting Donald Trump. And, telling, this is, I guess, 1980. That's what I'm saying. They jump around a lot with the timelines. This is 1980. Ronald Reagan. Roger Stone is working with Ronald Reagan's campaign. 1979, I guess. Reagan's running. and he's working. Uh, Roger Stone is working for Reagan's campaign, and he wants to get Trump's endorsement because Trump is already a very powerful media personality at this time. So he tells him about, oh, Ron's gonna set the world on fire. You know, he's gonna change things. He's gonna get things back to the way they were, like, back in the day in the 1950s and everything. And Trump was like, that's what we need, because you got all these people taking advantage. Basically, his shtick again. All these people taking advantage of America. You got the oil sheiks, you got the communist liberals, you got the Japs, you got this group, that group, this country, and that country, basically, taking advantage of the United States. And Roger Stone is really impressed with this. And Roger Stone is like, you should think Donald Trump about running for president. And he says to him, being in politics, running for president, he says, why would I do that? All these politicians are suckers. You know how I know? Because I've bought off the politicians. They're very stupid people. They're very stupid people, right? He says. But then he tells him about Roy Cohn. He said, did you hear about Russell, Roy Cohn's lover? He has HIV. HIV is a huge, big scare in the 1980s, right? So, and everybody thinks that you can, at that time, people didn't really know how it was how it was transmitted. People thought it was transmitted airborne. It was a huge scare, right? When it first came out back then. So Trump decides he's going to kick his best friend's and mentor's lover out of his hotel and leave him out on the street because he is scared of catching HIV. Right? Because he puts two and two together, basically, that Roy Cohn too has HIV, because obviously this is his lover and he's sleeping with him, right? So he must have it, right? So he's like, I can't afford to be around him. Roy Cohn is even calling him in his meeting with Roger Stone, and he's ignoring him. He's ignoring him. He doesn't want anything to do with his own best friend. So Roy Cohn confronts him about it. He says, Donald Trump, you're a fraud. I made you everything you are, and you think you're better than me. He says, you know what you are, Roy? You're nothing. You're the devil, Roy. And then Roy Cohn says, yeah, there's a guy behind him that says, with a sign that says, Jesus saves. And Roy says, why don't you save him? And he slaps Donald Trump. Now he's touched Donald Trump now. So Trump thinks he's infected with HIV now. So he goes to his doctor, and the doctor is telling Trump about the diet pills, right? Trump is taking these amphetamine diet pills. Now, in the media, what we know about Donald Trump is that he's a teetotaler because of Fred Trump's struggles with alcohol. It's claimed that Donald Trump does not smoke or drink or use alcohol or anything like that. But according to this movie, he does do that. He takes these pills. So Trump, he wants to know a couple things from his doctor. One, he wants to know is how AIDS is transmitted. Does he have it from Roy Cohn? Two, he wants to have um, liposuction and a tummy tuck and hair transplants because he's going bald. He wants to. So they show him having on the table having cosmetic surgery. And it basically ends with the death of Roy Cohn. There's some really emotional scenes where Roy is being asked by the media if he's gay, and he's denying it. Does he have HIV? And he's denying it, and Trump is watching it on TV. And they wheel Roy Cohn in for his birthday party in a wheelchair, and not so long after his birthday party, and after he's disbarred from being a lawyer, he then passes away. Then they show, Trump writing he meets with his ghostwriter, the guy that wrote the art of the deal, and the ghostwriter wants to get into Trump's childhood. He wants to get into Trump's past. He said, "Look, I don't want you to get into my past. Don't bust my balls about some bullshit. Everybody's always trying to bust each other's balls, trying to learn about the past. But I'm here to talk about my three rules, which is attack, 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 always deny, and never admit defeat." So he basically tells him the same line that Roy told him: there's only killers and winners in this world. And we see the complete transformation of Donald Trump into the Donald Trump we came to all know and love / loathe. So this is a pretty good movie. Sebastian Stan and the actor that plays Roy Cohn's performances were both good, but especially Sebastian Stan. He really captured Donald Trump, the essence of who Trump was and who he became. Um, Donald Trump himself, he called this movie a hit piece. He didn't like the movie, right? He said the movie was out to get him, out to portray him as a bad person. But I don't really think the way he portrayed him as a horrible bad person. I mean, yeah, he became a horribly bad person, but in the beginning, he was just somebody trying to save his family's business. As unethical as the practices of he and his father were, with the racist allegations, I think Ali Abbasi and Gabriel Ali Abbasi, the director, and Gabriel Sherman, the writer, tried their best to portray him as an admirable individual, at least at first. So, of course, Trump is like, he develops this victim complex. He thinks that everybody's always out to get him. Obviously, that was something from him, about him from a very early age. That he had. It's not just now. He's always kind of had that. You know, from the battles with Mayor Koch, from the battles with this person, that person. He always needed a new rival, and we saw that. You know, in his life as a celebrity, he always needed a new rival. He always needed somebody to attack. Whether it's the deep state, whether it's Rosie O'Donnell, whether it's the radical left, whether it's James Comey, whether it's um, other people that he's fired, Jeff Sessions, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, this person, that person, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. He always needs somebody to attack. He has this huge victim complex, and we see that throughout the movie. So I think it's the first time ever that there's been a movie released about a sitting president. The president still is in office. I know there were low budget movies, on Netflix or whatever, released about Barack Obama, but you know, when he was in office, but nothing really that's big. Especially nominated for an Oscar, best actor and best supporting actor, Jeremy Strong, best supporting actor for Ray Cohn, and Sebastian Stan, best actor for Donald Trump. You know, peace, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, David and Raymond, for both contributing. Hey, what's up, you guys? Peace.